Somewhere in a boardroom in Detroit, an engineer just stared at a spreadsheet and said one sentence out loud: "That's impossible." Not because the number was too big, because it was too small. $22,000. That's the price tag on a brand new, 7-seat electric SUV that just rolled off an assembly line. Not in California, not in Shenzhen, but in a factory in Western India. For context, the cheapest Tesla in America costs almost twice that. A base Toyota electric crossover costs even more. And BYD, the company everyone calls the Tesla killer, still can't touch this price with a comparable 7-seater. So, how did a company most Americans have never heard of just undercut the biggest names in electric vehicles without cutting corners on size, tech, or range? That's the question the entire auto industry is quietly asking right now. And the answer says a lot more about the future of electric cars than anyone expected. The company is Mahindra. In India, the name is everywhere: tractors, SUVs, even farm equipment that plows fields from Punjab to Maharashtra. But outside of South Asia, Mahindra has spent decades as a footnote in global car conversations. A regional player. Reliable, but never revolutionary. Until now. In late 2025, Mahindra pulled the wraps off a vehicle called the XCV9S, a 7-seater electric SUV built on a platform the company spent years developing from scratch. And the price that came with it sent a ripple through an industry that thought it already knew where the electric car race was headed. But here's the twist almost nobody is talking about. This isn't really a story about one SUV. It's a story about a completely different strategy for winning the EV war, one that Detroit and even parts of China may not be ready for. Let's start with the number everyone's fixated on. Roughly $22,000. That's the starting price, converted from the vehicle's home market cost of about 20 lakh rupees. For that money, you get a 7-seat SUV, not a stripped-down city hatchback, not a golf cart-sized runabout, but full-size family vehicle with 3 rows of seating. Now compare that to what $22,000 buys you almost anywhere else in the electric car world. In the United States, that budget barely gets you into the door of the cheapest EV on the market, and it definitely doesn't get you 7 seats. In Europe, you're looking at a small city car, not a family SUV. Even BYD, a company famous for aggressive pricing, doesn't have a direct 7-seat rival at that number. So the immediate question is obvious. How is this even possible without the car being a death trap on wheels? That's where things get interesting. Because Mahindra didn't get here by cutting safety or slapping a big battery into an old design. They got here by rethinking the entire foundation the car was built on. But that's only half the story. Every car starts with something called a platform. Think of it as the skeleton the entire vehicle is built around. Get the skeleton wrong, and no amount of clever marketing saves you. Mahindra spent years and a serious chunk of investment, including hundreds of millions of dollars raised specifically to fund its electric vehicle push, building a dedicated electric platform from the ground up. It's called INGLO, not a modified gasoline chassis with batteries crammed underneath, which is how a lot of budget EVs cut corners. A purpose-built electric skeleton, designed for batteries first. Why does that matter so much? Because a dedicated EV platform lets engineers place the battery pack low and flat across the floor, which improves both interior space and handling. It lets them scale the same underlying architecture across multiple vehicles, small SUVs, big SUVs, maybe even sedans, without redesigning everything from scratch every time. And critically, it lets them cut manufacturing costs across an entire lineup instead of just one model. This is the same logic Tesla used with its platforms. The same logic Volkswagen used with its MEB architecture. The difference is Mahindra built theirs specifically with India's cost realities in mind, which turned out to be a superpower, not a limitation. Because in India, there is no room for premium pricing. The market simply won't support it at scale. So Mahindra was forced, almost by necessity, to solve a problem that companies in wealthier markets never had to solve. How do you make an electric SUV that a middle-class family can actually afford without the government propping up every single sale? And once you solve that problem for one market, you've accidentally built a blueprint the entire industry has been chasing for years. This is where everything changed. To understand why this matters, you have to understand why every other major EV maker is stuck at a much higher price floor. Tesla built its brand on premium positioning first, mass affordability second, and even years after promising a cheaper model, its most affordable vehicles still sit well above this price point globally. Toyota, despite being the best-selling automaker on the planet for gasoline cars, has been famously cautious and slow with pure electric vehicles, prioritizing hybrids instead, which means its EV lineup is neither cheap nor abundant. And BYD, while genuinely aggressive on price in China and expanding fast worldwide, still faces steep import duties, shipping costs, and localization expenses the moment it tries to sell outside its home turf, which erodes the very price advantage that made it famous. In other words, the affordable EV race has been talked about by every major player for years. Promised, teased, delayed. Mahindra didn't announce a future affordable EV. They shipped one. And they did it while giving buyers something almost no one expected at this price: 3 rows of seating, a family-sized footprint, and a battery platform built for range, not just for headlines. So why did this happen in India, of all places, and not in Detroit, Shanghai, or Berlin? Here's the part most headlines are skipping entirely. India isn't just a place where Mahindra happened to build a cheap car. India is one of the most brutally competitive, cost-sensitive automotive markets on Earth. Margins are thin. Consumers are price-obsessed. And for decades, that environment forced Indian manufacturers to become masters of something the industry calls frugal engineering, building products that do more with less, not because it's trendy, but because it's the only way to survive. Mahindra didn't invent frugal engineering, but they've spent generations perfecting it on tractors and SUVs sold to farmers and families who scrutinize every rupee. Apply that DNA to an electric vehicle platform, and you get something genuinely different from what comes out of Fremont, California, or Wolfsburg, Germany. There's also the scale of ambition behind it. This isn't a one-off publicity stunt. Mahindra has laid out plans for a whole family of electric vehicles built on this same platform, all rolling out over the next several years, backed by a major expansion of production capacity, nearly doubling their EV manufacturing output to keep up with demand they're expecting to explode. That's the signal serious industry analysts are watching. Not just one cheap SUV, but a company positioning itself to flood a massive, underserved price segment before anyone else figures out how. No one expected what happened next. Once a company proves a 7-seat EV can be built and sold profitably near the $22,000 mark, it changes the conversation for everyone else, whether they like it or not. Every automaker chasing EV market share now has a new data point to explain to investors. It's possible. Someone did it. Which means every excuse about why affordable EVs aren't feasible yet gets a lot harder to sell in a boardroom. For BYD, it raises the stakes on expansion into price-sensitive markets across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, regions where Mahindra's approach could give a serious head start. For Toyota, it adds pressure to stop hedging on pure EVs and actually compete on price, not just hybrid caution. And for Tesla, a company that has built its identity on being the affordable EV pioneer that never quite delivered a truly cheap model, it's a reminder that the cheap EV crown might not be theirs to claim after all. None of this means Mahindra is about to dethrone Tesla in California or BYD in Europe overnight. The XCV9S, at least for now, is built and sold primarily for the Indian market, and exporting it globally comes with its own mountain of regulatory, safety, and infrastructure hurdles. But the strategy behind it, a dedicated low-cost EV platform, frugal engineering, and aggressive scale, is exactly the kind of blueprint that spreads fast once it proves itself. And that's really the biggest reveal hiding inside this story. This was never just about one SUV costing $22,000. It's proof that the next major battleground in the EV war isn't going to be decided in Silicon Valley or Shenzhen. It's going to be decided in the markets everyone else considered secondary, the ones where price isn't a marketing angle, it's survival. The company that masters affordability in the toughest, most cost-sensitive markets on Earth builds a playbook that eventually works everywhere else too. Mahindra didn't out-engineer Tesla's software. They didn't outscale BYD's battery production. What they did was solve a problem the wealthier players never had to take seriously. And in doing so, they may have just handed the entire industry a preview of where affordable electromobility is actually headed. For years, the electric vehicle story has been told from the top down: flashy reveals, 6-figure hypercars, premium SUVs, chasing headlines, and stock prices. Mahindra just told the same story from the bottom up. And history has a habit of showing us that the companies who win the mass market, not the luxury market, are the ones who end up reshaping entire industries. So maybe the real question isn't whether Tesla, Toyota, or BYD are shocked. Maybe the real question is simpler than that. What happens when the world's next great EV isn't built for people chasing the future, but for people who just need a car that actually works for their budget? If that shift is really underway, the electric vehicle industry, as we know it, might be about to look a lot different than anyone predicted. If this kind of story interests you, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives into the companies quietly reshaping global industries, and check out the next video where we break down exactly how far behind the world's biggest automakers really are in the race for the affordable EV.